toast was meant to be a blessing, a ribbon tying two families together, but the words slipped like poison instead. The bride's hands were still clasped in her husband's when her mother-in-law leaned in close, her lips brushing her ear, her voice steady enough that only she could hear. "You'll never be enough for him. You're just a pretty face, and that fades." The clink of glasses and laughter drowned out the cruelty, but the words pierced sharper than crystal breaking on the floor. She didn't flinch. She didn't give the older woman the satisfaction of seeing her crack. She raised her glass, smiled as though nothing had been said, and swallowed the insult like bitter wine. Her smile stayed flawless, rehearsed from years of navigating these small cuts, but inside, something shifted. Rage, steady and controlled, stirred beneath the calm surface of her expression. The guests saw only grace, a bride radiant in white, her laughter bright enough to match the chandeliers overhead. No one noticed how her grip tightened around the stem of the glass, how she drew in a measured breath to cool the fire kindling inside her chest. The humiliation had been laid at her feet, but she bent low, quietly gathering it, storing it away. To those watching, she was the perfect picture of composure. To herself, she was a storm sharpening in silence. This was not new. The woman had been relentless since the beginning. Tiny remarks dressed as advice, critiques hidden in smiles, constant reminders that she was an outsider. Each comment left a small scar, shallow enough to be ignored if she wished, but they had accumulated over time, layering like salt rubbed into an open wound. Tonight, though, was different. Tonight, when she should have been celebrated, when she should have felt safe and cherished, the mother-in-law had chosen her moment to strike hardest. And in doing so, she had made a fatal mistake. It was one thing to chip at her quietly in private. It was another to try and brand her with shame at her own wedding. That insult was no passing cruelty. It was the one that lit the fuse. Beneath the veil that brushed against her cheek, hidden from the world, she made a vow. Not of devotion to the man whose hand held hers, but a vow to herself. This day would not be remembered as the day she was diminished. It would not end with her broken beneath another woman's shadow. It would be the first page of a new chapter, the moment her silence ended. She would not confront her here, not yet. The woman thrived on public confrontation, on making her seem small while she looked noble. No, this war would not be fought on her mother-in-law's terms. It would be fought in whispers and carefully laid snares, in patience and precision. She smiled once more, her face soft in the glow of candlelight, her eyes glistening with the kind of tears guests mistook for joy. Inside, her mind was already rearranging the pieces of her life like chess on a board. A lifetime of insults had carved patience into her bones, and patience would now serve her better than fury ever could. Her mother-in-law thought she had drawn blood tonight, but what she had truly done was awaken the one thing she should have feared most. A bride who knew how to wear a mask, and a woman who would never forgive. The laughter and clinking glasses swirled around her, a celebration that felt hollow against the echo of a whispered poison. At the wedding table, she sat with a smile that could fool anyone, yet every word, every glance from her mother-in-law landed like a calculated strike. Behind the polished veneer of joy, a seed of quiet fury took root. Each compliment turned sideways, each gentle prod, each forced gesture of approval carried the sting of contempt. She did not flinch. She did not betray the humiliation. Instead, she let it settle deep within her, a shadow coiled beneath the fabric of her gown, a silent weight that would shape everything to come. Her intelligence and composure were her armor. Years of navigating subtle cruelties had honed her ability to appear unaffected while cataloging every slight, every barbed comment, every glance that suggested she was less than. Outwardly graceful, she laughed when expected, nodded when prompted, and allowed the world to see only a perfect bride. Yet beneath that calm exterior, her mind was sharp, relentless, and unyielding. She remembered the words that cut, the gestures that dismissed, the laughter that excluded. Nothing was lost. Nothing was forgiven. Everything was stored. Her mother-in-law thrived on control, on the illusion that wealth and influence could shape the lives of those around her. Every interaction was an opportunity to assert dominance, to remind the bride, and everyone else, of the hierarchy she believed unassailable. She smiled, offered advice laced with derision, and whispered judgments meant to wound without leaving evidence. Every family gathering, every casual comment, every orchestrated social encounter was a demonstration of power, a reminder that no one dared to defy her. Yet even in this, she underestimated her daughter-in-law. Her husband, devoted and loving, remained blind to the venom at his side. He saw his mother as a figure of elegance, a guiding hand, a protective presence. He could not see that her words were weapons, or that her politeness masked ruthless precision. His love was genuine but naive, and he assumed harmony where there was subtle conflict. Every smile he offered, every casual touch, reinforced her restraint. She would not confront him yet. There was no need. His blindness was an asset she would use with careful patience. Over the years, the pattern of undermining became clear, a mosaic of subtle assaults that painted her as unworthy. Backhanded compliments about her appearance, sly comparisons to women who had come before, insinuations about inadequacy hidden in well-meaning advice. They were all deliberate. Part of a slow erosion meant to fracture her confidence. Where others might have snapped or pleaded, she observed. She catalogued. She weighed each insult for its strategic value. Flashbacks crept in unbidden, each a memory of public humiliation disguised as normalcy. Family dinners where her words were twisted. Casual gatherings where her achievements were minimized. Wedding planning sessions where her taste was dismissed and her efforts ignored, all layered together into a mosaic of oppression. And through every instance she remained outwardly composed, absorbing the wounds without revealing their depth. The mother-in-law's confidence bordered on arrogance. Her wealth, her social standing, her cultivated image created a bubble of invincibility. She believed herself untouchable, that no one could ever challenge her authority or undermine her position. She underestimated the quiet persistence that thrives beneath the surface, the kind that waits, patient, for the right moment to strike. Every insult, every slight, every moment of condescension was filed away in a hidden ledger of memory. The bride did not react, did not argue, did not even appear to notice. She stored them, each wound a carefully numbered weapon in the arsenal she was building, a private record of grievances that would one day demand repayment. She understood the value of patience. She understood the weight of preparation. To the outside world, she was serene, smiling with effortless grace. But the calm was deliberate, a shield that concealed the storm gathering behind her eyes. Every nod, every polite laugh, every measured gesture was part of a strategy. She waited, calculating each step, ensuring that when the time came, every piece would fall precisely into place. In the quiet moments, hidden from the gaze of friends and family, she made a dark promise to herself. The war would come, yes, but it would unfold on her terms. No sudden eruptions, no emotional outbursts, only precise, undeniable retribution. She would move with patience and cunning, leaving no escape for the woman who had so carelessly tried to diminish her. The day of reckoning would arrive, but it would be hers alone to command, and when it did, it would leave nothing but the truth of her power in its wake. The bride had learned long ago to read between the lines, to notice the subtle tremor in her mother-in-law's laughter, the calculated pause before a compliment, the way her eyes narrowed ever so slightly when she felt challenged. Each smile, each gesture, each carefully timed remark carried a weight that went unnoticed by the rest of the family, but registered sharply in her mind. These cracks behind the smile were patterns, repeating in cycles of manipulation and control, and she cataloged them silently, letting each tiny deceit deepen her understanding of the woman she would one day confront. The recognition was not frightening, it was empowering. Every hidden agenda, every unspoken insult, was a thread she would one day pull to unravel the entire tapestry of her mother-in-law's dominance. Evidence began to surface in unexpected ways, scattered like breadcrumbs for a patient hunter. A snippet of conversation carelessly overheard, a letter left on a desk, documents misplaced but never destroyed. Each piece revealed a glimpse into the meticulous web her mother-in-law wove around her family, friends, and business associates. Nothing was hidden enough for someone who observed without bias. She noted each misstep, each oversight, and stored them in the recesses of her mind, forming a blueprint of her enemy's vulnerabilities. The more she discovered, the more precise her strategy became, a lattice of information ready to support the weight of retribution. The past rose unbidden, memories sharpened by time. At dinners where her accomplishments were minimized, gatherings where her opinions were twisted into ridicule, and moments where she had smiled through humiliation, she revisited each encounter with clarity. Every small cut, every pointed joke, every dismissive glance that had once been swallowed in silence now fueled the fire of her resolve. These recollections were no longer wounds. They were ammunition, meticulously documented in memory, waiting for the day when precision would meet opportunity. She began to map her adversary with painstaking detail, charting business dealings, public statements, social alliances, and personal weaknesses. Every meeting, every investment, every carefully curated public image became data in a mental dossier, revealing the patterns of greed, arrogance, and vulnerability that the woman believed were hidden beneath layers of wealth and influence. The bride's research was relentless, leaving no avenue unexplored, no corner unexamined. She studied the way her mother-in-law interacted with allies, the subtle gestures that indicated fear or overcompensation, and the cracks that signaled overconfidence. By the time her plan began to take shape, she knew the terrain better than anyone else, including the woman she intended to destroy. Allies appeared where she had least expected them. Family members who had grown wary of the mother-in-law's manipulations, neighbors who had seen kindness twisted into cruelty, colleagues who had endured professional sabotage. They were quietly recruited through careful conversation and subtle persuasion. Each ally became a thread in the web, a silent participant in the orchestration of justice, bound not by vengeance alone, but by the recognition of truth long ignored. These hidden supporters amplified her power, creating a network that operated beneath the surface, invisible to the woman who fancied herself untouchable. The arrogance of her mother-in-law was breathtaking. She flaunted her wealth and influence openly, flaunting insults with a casual elegance that belied their sting. She believed every slight was perfectly executed, every deception flawless, every person around her blind to her machinations. Yet she failed to notice the eyes quietly observing, the patience quietly building, the ledger of offenses accumulating silently in the mind of her intended victim. Her overconfidence was a fortress built on sand, and the tide of retribution was already rising. Patience became the bride's most formidable weapon. Every minor indignity, every careless comment, every public slight was noted, categorized, and stored as ammunition for the precise moment when the balance of power would shift. There was no rush, no impulsive reaction, only the meticulous construction of inevitability. The tension between outward serenity and inward calculation sharpened into a quiet, deadly edge, a calm that promised chaos to come. Beneath the facade of delicate composure, she nurtured a resolve as unyielding as steel, fragile porcelain on the outside, sharp edges concealed within. She perfected the illusion of vulnerability while preparing a counterstrike that would be both devastating and indisputable. When the time came, the elegance of her exterior would hide the lethal precision of her plans, ensuring that her revenge would be not only complete, but masterfully executed. And as she breathed through another day of smiles and polite exchanges, the promise she made to herself echoed silently, a vow as unwavering as the storm she was readying to unleash. The mother-in-law had grown careless, her lies and shady dealings leaving subtle but unmistakable traces the bride had learned to follow without drawing attention. Conversations meant to be private slipped too easily, contracts left unsigned or altered in haste, and offhand remarks at gatherings revealed more than intended. Every misstep became a piece of a puzzle, each one carefully catalogued in the bride's mind. She watched quietly, noting patterns, memorizing faces, and observing the cracks in the armor her mother-in-law so desperately tried to maintain. Nothing escaped her attention, and the shadows she moved in became the perfect vantage point to witness truth concealed behind arrogance and deceit. Blinded by her own self-assurance, the mother-in-law assumed her daughter-in-law's calm demeanor signified weakness. She flaunted wealth, manipulated social situations, and smiled at her as though she were easily dismissed. Every subtle insult and orchestrated humiliation was delivered under the illusion of superiority, while she failed to recognize the patience simmering beneath that serene surface. The bride's silence was not submission, it was strategy, and her composed exterior was the shield behind which a meticulous mind was plotting a reckoning that would leave no room for escape. The net began to form with deliberate precision. Key witnesses were subtly positioned, documents discreetly copied, and the right eyes were guided to the damning truths that had long been hidden. Friends and acquaintances who had sensed injustices were quietly informed, while unguarded conversations and mislaid papers became tools of proof. The bride's method was patient and deliberate, a careful weaving of evidence that ensured the mother-in-law's arrogance would later be her undoing. Each piece was connected invisibly, like threads of a trap set to tighten at precisely the right moment. Public arenas became stages for quiet exposure. At family dinners, the mother-in-law's casual boasts and cutting remarks were catalogued. At weddings, her manipulations and subtle gaslighting were noted by eyes that would later bear witness. Charity events offered glimpses of hypocrisy and deceit, each moment a small demonstration of arrogance laid bare. Yet the bride never reacted openly. She allowed the performances to unfold, recording every word, every gesture, every miscalculation, turning pride into evidence. Every move the bride made was calculated. The timing of conversations, the placement of witnesses, the careful dissemination of information, all were part of a meticulous orchestration. Nothing was left to chance. Every detail was anticipated and directed toward a single inevitable outcome. Even the mother-in-law's overconfidence, her assumption that she could manipulate without consequence, played perfectly into the trap. The bride's strategy relied on patience, precision, and the quiet accumulation of proof until no defense would remain. Suspense tightened like a noose around the unsuspecting matriarch. She believed she had cornered her daughter-in-law, her influence unchallenged, her schemes invisible. She had misread composure for weakness and patience for submission, blind to the fact that the bride was a step ahead at every turn. Every attempt at intimidation, every calculated insult, every social maneuver only drew her deeper into a web she could neither see nor escape. Then the moment arrived. The bars closed around her with quiet inevitability. The evidence, once collected and positioned, revealed itself in perfectly timed sequences of exposure. Her confidence, her wealth, her influence, all became weapons turned against her. Those who had witnessed injustices stepped forward. Documents surfaced. Inconsistencies and manipulations could no longer be denied. In the calm precision of her execution, the bride ensured that the fall was complete and unavoidable. The prison had been built silently, invisibly, and the mother-in-law walked straight into it, her arrogance the last misstep that sealed her fate. The public event had been chosen with meticulous care, each element orchestrated to ensure the mother-in-law's every misdeed could be quietly exposed without a single false step. The bride moved among the guests with serene composure, a picture of elegance and calm, while beneath the surface, the threads of her plan tightened. Every whispered conversation, every glance, every slip of the tongue was carefully guided toward revelation, and she watched as her mother-in-law continued to parade confidence, unaware that the very arena she thought would cement her dominance was the stage for her undoing. The hypocrisy she had long hidden could no longer remain invisible. Lies, manipulations, and financial irregularities surfaced naturally, each revelation impossible to ignore. The mother-in-law's smug smiles faltered as those who had previously been silent witnesses began to see the truth in plain light. The bride's strategy required no raised voice, no dramatics. The evidence spoke for itself, undeniable and precise, stripping away years of carefully constructed illusion. Every subtle act of deceit that had once gone unnoticed now became an instrument of exposure, and the woman who had thrived on control felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Questions began to ripple through the circle of friends and family, subtle at first but growing in clarity and intensity. Allies once loyal to the mother-in-law found themselves reconsidering, recalling moments of manipulation and cruelty they had previously dismissed. Even her son, long blinded by maternal devotion, could not escape the growing awareness that his mother's facade was flawed. The bride's calm, composed observation allowed these realizations to emerge naturally, letting truth take root in minds long conditioned to accept appearances over reality. Justice was delivered not with fury, but with the precision of quiet intellect. Each word the bride spoke, each action she took, mirrored her mother-in-law's own patterns, reflecting them back in a way that left no room for denial. There was no dramatic confrontation, no emotional outburst, only the steady dismantling of the woman's authority using her own tools of manipulation and deception. The bride's composure was a weapon, her patience a blade, and each revelation landed with the weight of inevitability, exposing the depth of the mother-in-law's misdeeds while maintaining an unassailable calm. Overconfidence had been the mother-in-law's greatest blind spot. She had believed herself untouchable, her influence absolute, her control unquestioned. But the carefully laid net had gone unnoticed until it was too late, and every boast, every casual insult, every assumption of superiority now became part of the trap she had fallen into. Recognition came only when the consequences were unavoidable, and the woman who had thrived on arrogance realized that. She had been outmaneuvered at every turn, her own hubris serving as the final instrument of her collapse. Victory was claimed not with noise, but with silence. The bride stood firm, unshaken, allowing the truth to speak on its own. There was no gloating, no unnecessary confrontation, only the quiet satisfaction of justice achieved. Those who had doubted the bride now recognized the depth of her strategy and the inevitability of the outcome. The power of calm and patience had triumphed over manipulation and pride, and in that quiet dominance, the final measure of control was fully hers. I didn't need her approval. The bride reflected inwardly, a subtle, satisfied smile forming. I only needed her silence. And now I had both. The mother-in-law's fall was complete, her influence irrevocably diminished, and the bride emerged not merely unscathed but elevated, a figure defined by intellect, patience, and the unassailable power of quiet, deliberate revenge. In the stillness that followed, there was no doubt. The stage had been set, the trap executed flawlessly, and the outcome was as inevitable as it was satisfying. The fall came quietly at first, imperceptible to those who still clung to loyalty, but swift and undeniable once the cracks widened. The mother-in-law's arrogance, long concealed beneath layers of charm and intimidation, could no longer withstand the exposure of her lies and manipulations. Each misdeed, each carefully hidden act of control, now lay bare before friends, family, and acquaintances who had once accepted her word as gospel. Her power, cultivated over years of subtle tyranny, unraveled in moments, leaving her scrambling to maintain composure as the weight of her own duplicity pressed down. Those who had once admired her began to turn away, their awe replaced by caution, then disbelief. Family members who had once echoed her opinions without question now whispered doubts to one another, revisiting incidents they had ignored or rationalized. Friends who had lined up to witness her influence now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a facade so thoroughly compromised. The social sphere that had once bolstered her dominance fractured, leaving her isolated in ways she had never anticipated. Her son, long blinded by filial loyalty and his mother's subtle manipulation, finally perceived the truth with unfiltered clarity. The intricate web of deceit she had spun around him, and the household could no longer shield her from his understanding. Every slight, every disguised insult, every manipulative maneuver clicked into place in his mind, exposing the depth of her control and the injustice she had perpetuated. His confusion gave way to disbelief, then to a quiet but firm reckoning, as he saw the mother he thought he knew replaced by a figure consumed by the consequences of her own pride. Throughout this unraveling, the bride maintained an unshakable calm, a composed presence that contrasted sharply with the turbulence surrounding her. There was no triumphal gloating, no indulgence in spectacle. Instead, a quiet intelligence underpinned every movement and decision. Her patience, meticulous planning, and strategic foresight now bore fruit, revealing that true power lies not in fury or impulsive confrontation, but in steady, calculated action. The victory was hers, executed with precision and grace, leaving no room for argument or misinterpretation. The success of her plan reinforced a truth long understood, but seldom exercised: that revenge, when measured and deliberate, is the most potent form of justice. Every insult stored, every slight remembered, every observation catalogued had contributed to an outcome that could not be undone. The mother-in-law's arrogance, once a shield, had become a liability, and the bride's patience and intelligence had transformed it into her undoing. There was satisfaction in the certainty that justice had been meted out without the need for spectacle, allowing truth and strategy to speak louder than anger. She told me I'd never be good enough, the bride reflected, her voice steady and unshaken. She was right, because I was always better. In that final realization, the journey of quiet observation, meticulous preparation, and calculated execution culminated in an undeniable truth. Triumph is sweetest when it arrives not through wrath, but through the enduring power of intelligence, patience, and unassailable composure.